Yeah. Hmm. And was Winnie, and is Winnie's twin still living?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
we also have an older sister named Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Cool names.
Yeah, that was my grandma's name. Virginia, good name. Well, let's look at our text for today, which is kind of part 2. I don't know who did manna last week. Was it you or was it Pastor Bill?
Pastor Bill did it.
Okay, so last week you looked at Matthew 16:13-20. Peter's confession. I'm sure you talked about the garden they were in and all that kind of stuff and those kinds of things. So I don't remember this being divided before, but this text, because it really kind of functions as one, excuse me. But here it is, kind of divvied up for us. So let me pull it up here so we can share it. Someone want to read?
I will.
Okay.
Okay, where does it go to?
28.
28. Okay.
Mhm.
From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly, I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." The word of the Lord.
Yeah, thanks be to God. Yeah, so a few different sort of strains and themes going through here. Peter, the way of the cross, kind of the glory of God revealed through Christ, what that looks like. So yeah, are there things that are sticking out to folks today as far as starting out?
In verse 27, what reward is he talking about?
Yeah. Well, does it say reward in yours?
And he shall reward every man according to his works.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And in mine it says repay, and yours says what?
Mine says repay
Repay. Yeah.
according to what he's done.
According to what he has done. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I'm trying to think, there's a translation here, but a literal, I'm trying to think where I saw that here in some of this study. I copied this just because I thought it might be helpful to refer to.
I can look it up.
In the commentary, yeah, the ACNT commentary.
Pay back, repay.
Yeah. Then you will, judge all nations, dispensing rewards and punishments, rarely based as scripture says. He will repay each one according to his conduct. So, yeah, reward sounds much better, doesn't it? Yeah. And I don't know, I don't have the word in front of me, the Greek word in front of me, but how this Lutheran commentator had said, it literally says, the Greek text reads, "He will repay each one according to his conduct." So,
It's funny, that word for conduct is praxis. That's a word that you hear a lot in seminary.
praxis, yeah. So, this commentator at least talked about how there was, let's see, I can actually just read this here. Matthew, by all means, wishes to drive home the overriding value of of very practical deeds of mercy and love. So it makes me think, as he's talking about this, makes me think a little bit about Luther, who said, giving an offering to the church, giving to the poor and helping your neighbor is just as holy as, buying an not buying an indulgence, but but giving an offering to the church or that kind of thing. Yeah. Wanted to put those acts of service, and there was a whole piety movement that kind of came out of the Reformation, both in the Reformed churches, but also in the Roman Catholic Church as well. The whole church, there was some piety movement through that. But anyway, so it reminds me of that. But it says Matthew pictures Jesus in scenes of judgment, sometimes as judge and sometimes as advocate or prosecutor, not because Matthew is harsh, demanding, or brooding, and not because he is especially intrigued with the future of the world. On this topic, he's got comments on in chapter 24. Matthew, by all means, wishes to drive home the overriding value of very practical deeds of mercy and love. Okay, I read that. He struggled against trends in his environment, such as the elevation of ritual observance or boasting about spiritual endowments. And he has references, and you can see them up there, but references in the scriptures for this, or arrogance on the part of teachers and leaders. These and other currents threatened the vitality and centrality of mercy, and Matthew struggled against them. The immediate context of the saying points to the nearly universal tendency to judge a person's worth on the basis of wealth. So 25 to 26 says, kind of preceding this, says, for those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? So that's kind of the setup to that, is that if you're gaining, receiving this reward, kind of in this earthly place, Matthew says that is not blessing. So he points, let's see, all that is excluded. So wealth, all of these other things, spiritual endowments, ritual observance, boasting about my teaching or leadership ability, all of it is empty without deeds of mercy. And so that's what Matthew is fighting against and speaking against that's happening, or he sees happening in the church. So he's remembering these words to bring that home. And then it says all that is excluded in 28. Then Jesus caps his summons to discipleship with a strong declaration. There are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So anyway, he goes on with that verse as well. But I don't know if that's answers what you're asking there. But as far as the reward or the repayments, it's a focus on that the earthly things do matter. And I think we'll get to that as we talk a little bit about some stuff up above as well. Other things that are sticking out or.
I was glad that Kim's version said, for what would it profit if you lose your soul rather than life? That's the way I learned it. When I was a kid.
Right. Yeah. Your soul is more comprehensive. It's all of who you are. Lose yourself in a sense. Yeah. Lose your identity. So it's not just. Yeah, go ahead, Margot.
Sorry. How about the last part? Truly, I tell you that some standing here. This is really small. Usually it's much larger than this, and I can hardly read it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I must be going blind. Why? Oh, that's so much better.
Yeah. Let me get it so it fits in the whole screen. Yeah, there we go.
Truly, I tell you that there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And that indicates to me that some people are going to live forever until Christ comes.
Right. Yeah, they'll live until Christ returns. Yeah. So we kind of have to ask ourselves with that verse, we talked about this a lot yesterday in our staff meeting, but what is the Son of Man coming in his kingdom? Is that the second coming? Is that the cross? Is that the resurrection? Is that the cross and resurrection? Kim asked, is that is that Pentecost? What is it Jesus is referring to? Is it revelation to us that's kind of ongoing, that we will see clearly what Jesus means in his unusual statements before our death? Yeah.
At the time, some people thought he'd be coming back because there was a big to do when all those guys got old and started dying.
Right. Yeah, that's when a lot of this started to get written down too. Was we're going to need to tell this story because Jesus hasn't come back. immediately as we thought, for sure. Yeah. And that may be part of what Matthew's saying too, is that he has that expectation. And so as he's writing, but again, this isn't just Matthew making stuff up. He's not, saying, well, Jesus probably should have said this. That's not how we see the scriptures being written. So if we believe Jesus said this, then what is he trying to say? Yeah. And by Matthew's time, he's writing, after the destruction of the temple. So he would have already had some significant losses in the community of faith. So yeah. Yeah, how do we see that? And how do we see it in light of what Jesus has said above about the way of the cross and what Messiah means, what Messiah looks like?
Yeah, I really have a hard time separating this from the cross,
Mhm.
From
Mhm.
the theology of the cross, that's where the Son of Man is revealed, where God is revealed in the Son of Man is revealed in his death.
Yeah. So let's look at Peter's confession here again. It's going to be small, but I'll blow it up.
Would that be on the cross or his resurrection that we would see Christ again?
Yeah.
Which is that?
I think it says that they will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. When I really thought of that, I thought taste death, is tasting Jesus's death. So they will not taste kind of like my death until they see me coming in my kingdom, which is on the cross, is kind of how I look at it. I know a lot of people think that means that there's martyrdom coming for everybody, and it does for everybody except John. So it can be read in a lot of different ways, but I am liking, the more I read this, the more I like the cross for this.
Mhm. Yeah.
Of course, a lot of them thought that they were so defeated, thinking that he was dead, and that everything fell apart.
Right.
Until they saw him rise, saw him later.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The resurrection is I don't know if I take this too far, but the resurrection is necessary, but it's also kind of the obvious or what isn't obvious on the cross. Like if the defeat of death, sin and death happens on the cross, if Christ puts those things to death by taking him on himself, the repayment for our deeds, which I don't want to be repaid for my deeds. So that word of law in verse 27, I think then to kind of get back to that question, kind of then comes with a word of gospel. I will taste death, you will not. So the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then will repay everyone for what they have done. And it is kind of specific. It's not just we talked about this yesterday, everyone being kind of like the church maybe, or the whole, or the community, but it actually is a little more individual than that in there. So it's the law, it's the hammer that kind of crushes us with that. But then turns around right in 28 and says, I'm in some kind of clouded language, I think for them at the time, but I will taste death, you will not taste this judgment, but I will taste it, and you'll see my glory, and you'll be covered in my righteousness. And that will be the gospel that responds to this law, if that makes sense. We're always looking for law and gospel, and that might be a spot where we see it verse to verse. So yeah, I kind of see that too, Margot, and is that this is the cross or the cross and resurrection event, which can't really be taken apart. They are an event central to our history. So they will see the Son of Man in his kingdom. And that's what the kingdom of God looks like, is taking on our judgment and releasing us. And in a way, actually what Jesus said last week about, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, whatever you loose that we loosed in heaven, Jesus then takes his binding and loosing, and he is bound so that we might be loosed, so that we might be set free. So we have a picture of what binding and loosing is intended to be, not our private judgment against people who wrong us, but certainly the truth against speaking truth to power and evil and corruption, but also looking for ways in which we give freedom to those who come to understand and see Christ's glory in his death, especially, but also in his resurrection. Other thoughts or things sticking out here?
I read something that was absolutely hilarious. I almost sent it to you, but then I thought, no, I want to save it for Manna.
Okay.
That Peter telling saying, far be it from me, for you, Lord. He's mansplaining to Jesus.
Yeah.
Have you read that?
No. But that's pretty good.
It's like the complete definition of mansplaining, because here's Jesus, the founder of our faith, and the word that created the world.
Yeah.
And Peter's trying to tell him.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. Hey, Jesus, I know you're the savior and everything, but let me tell you.
But let me tell
Let me
how
tell
it
you
should
what
really
this
be.
looks like. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting here as we start out in this text that we get this from that time on. Jesus began, I'm going to move this so I can see it, but Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering. So from that time on, this seems to be not just Jesus in this one moment, kind of saying to Peter, all right, great confession. It's been revealed to you by the Spirit and not by human understanding. God's foolishness is greater than our best understanding, kind of thing. But it seems to be an ongoing thing. And so I wonder if there's a frustration finally with Peter saying, this isn't how it goes. Right. And so not only is he very much mansplaining to Jesus, but I love that, but he's also perhaps kind of overcome with this frustration about what this is going to look like. And frankly, I'll go back to this because I think it's really good. The commentator here that I was reading says, Jesus speaks, encouraging them to deny themselves and to take up the cross and follow him. A harsh word, especially in a world where crucifixion was a familiar public spectacle, a dread and shameful torture reserved for slaves and foreigners. The cross was not yet an easy metaphor and had not yet been plated in gold. Each of the three following verses offers a reason for cross-bearing, and each begins with the conjunction for or because. So then he goes through these different things. In verse 24, first take up the cross, for it is paradoxically the way of life. And he talks about how we learn at an early age to preserve our life, to hold on to it, to protect it, which is kind of where Peter's coming from. Not just protecting his life, but wanting to protect Jesus' life. We've got to protect the Messiah. We'll do anything. We'll die, Jesus. We'll die for you. We'll go to battle for you. Fear and avoidance of anything life-threatening is deeply ingrained in us. Jesus' word, however, seizes his audience by the jugular and shakes them, challenging their natural assumptions. His words consist of two antithetical clauses, each of which includes a pair of antithetical verbs, save and lose and find. So whoever would save their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake, that's the important part, not just losing it. Your husband is not your cross to bear, all these things that people make up as sort of crosses to bear, kind of a thing. No, for Jesus' sake. All right, that's the focus. According to received wisdom, bearing a cross is revolting and disgusting. As he proceeds to contradict deep convictions about human life, Jesus does not bother to offer arguments or reasons. He simply shouts, halt. he makes the most sweeping claims as he summons to consideration of an absolutely opposite style. By speaking of losing life for my sake, he opposes their life with his life. He calls theirs a way of death, and whatever its surface appearance may be, he calls his own a way of life. And then it goes on to 26. He says, take up the cross, for it is possible to gain the whole world, amass the most impressive stockpile of worldly wealth, and in the same instant lose one's soul, we'll say. He refers back to the parable of the rich fool in Luke 12. What does that profit? Or to put it the other way around, is there anything, any object which a person would not gladly give in return for their life? And think of someone who was recently diagnosed with pretty awful cancer, and I'm sure if she could pay anything, give anything that she possesses, she would give it to ransom or prolong her life. Fear of loss prevents people from taking up the cross, but Jesus promises strange gain. Taking up the cross, in contradiction to the wisdom of the world, leads to saving, finding, and gaining one's life. This makes me think of times when people have come, just kind of desperate for connection, or they just feel like they're kind of lost, or they're struggling to find direction in their life, or that kind of thing. And often what I've found can help people with meaning, and I don't need to boil this down to just, do some service, and that's all of what Jesus is saying. But oftentimes connecting with people in a voluntary way, or serving in a way, opens people's eyes and connects them and gives them perspective on when you walk away from what you're trying to protect and serve and love and act in a way of mercy towards others. It's amazing how transformational that can be. Again, every youth trip I go on, every single time, there's this awakening that happens in these young people. So, and we had probably a little more privilege in our group this time that we went than I've had in the last several times that we've gone. But that was really eye-opening for them to see such poverty and such joy at the same time, and to see all of their stuff in a totally different light, to value what they were receiving from people who in their eyes had nothing, in contrast to what they who had, again, had everything. It would be an understatement in comparison with these folks they were serving and praying with and being served by. Just to see all of that as nothing compared to what they were receiving through these folks with their joy. They called it happiness. I would push back on happiness. They had a lot of very deep prayer concerns and tears and things like that, but they had a sense of who they were and their joy of being together with their family and having some place to live, even if it was barely a roof over their head. So anyway, I can see that practically lived out what Jesus is saying, but it's hard to read here, and it's very contradictory, and it's incredibly offensive to talk about taking up a cross in Jesus' day, right? Before the cross was gold plated, as the commentator says. So anyway, all of it's shocking what Jesus says, and yet life-giving at the same time. So.
It basically says the same thing in chapter 10. He says, whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So it's almost word for word what he says there, but it's in the context of.
That's Matthew 10, you said?
It's in the context of telling them that persecution is going to come, but don't have fear. Every hair on your head is numbered, telling them what their value is. So kind of interesting. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it here.
No.
There's.
No, right. And well, on that one is every hair on your head is counted. There's this deep care and compassion. 27 follows with everyone being repaid for their deeds. So it seems like it's ramping up a little.
Yeah.
A little harder.
I was interested in this word too. from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem instead of tell them or teach them or.
Right, right.
Have you read much about that? Like what's the,
I haven't, no, I haven't gotten much. I was kind of focused on from that time on as being an ongoing, like this became the daily focus, was going to the cross and what would happen and preparing them for that. Yeah.
yeah, and that from this time marks a change, this is like a new focus in Matthew now.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, if we go back to the end of this, to Margot, kind of what you were focused in on, there are some who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. If I turn the page here on this text to 17, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them to a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. So we may just be talking about the 6 days later, kind of a thing, as Jesus' glory is revealed to them. And so the disciples have to kind of, especially Peter, James, and John, have to kind of wrestle with this talk about the cross, showing them the way of the cross. So yeah, the showing, that would be interesting to look at. And then being transfigured and having Elijah and Moses there. And, Peter wants to build booths up there. I don't know. Yeah, Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I'll make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Peter's desperately trying to grasp at holding on to the glory of a theology of glory, which we have some control and we have some blessing, and we have, we don't have to experience loss, and we don't have to go through the cross. We don't have to die to anything. We can just keep this very happy and very glorious and very shiny, and very lovely for us right here and the here and now. And we have a million churches that are doing that very thing, that theology of glory or prosperity or whatever it might be, and kind of material blessing kind of stuff. But here's Matthew flying in the face of that with Jesus' words. So again, Peter wants to stay up there. Let's stay in the glory. And Jesus came and touched them and said, let's go. Let's go down the mountain. Don't tell anybody, but we got to go. Right.
When I've been on the mountaintop, sometimes I certainly have not wanted to come down.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, going back to the whole youth trip thing, we sometimes talk about that, how this has been this incredible experience. Now, what does that mean when you go back to school and you don't have all these people, like-minded people around you? What does it mean when you kind of navigate the popularity or the dramas of school? What does it mean in your own community to serve and to love? If this is such an incredible experience and life-changing, I'll tell you the story. On this trip, we had a snafu. I don't know why, but for some reason, some of the bags that we had decorated, especially from Rally Day, or not Rally Day, but from God's Work Our Hands Day in the spring, I had gone in there into the storage room and I had counted them because we had too many. We got 2 shipments because we both forgot that we had gotten a shipment during COVID when we were supposed to go. And then we asked for another shipment. And so we had too many bags. We had 700 bags, we needed 360. So we took 300 of the bags, and then we we're going to bring the other 40 undone to them and just give them back. But we took those 300 bags, we shipped them off to other churches that were going to be coming down. So that was fine. Then we took those out of storage, got them decorated, and then we had some left over. We decorated them at a lock-in, we decorated them at camp, and then we decorated some the night before we left on the trip, the last 80. And we had them all laid out there. Well, I was going to count them again, and someone said, oh, that's a lot of work. Why don't you just count the 40 you don't need and then just do the rest of them? So I did that. Well, unbeknownst to me, 100, some of them were sitting in the storage room. Some busybody had, I'm sure well-meaning, had put them back in there. So 100, 150, something like that. A bunch of them from that God's Work Our Hands Day were sitting in there. And where was I going with the story? So we oh darn it, I'm gonna lose my train.
So it worked out better. It worked out really cool.
Well, it worked out really cool in some way, and I'm trying to think of what I was, oh, I know what it was. I asked him, it did work out in a cool way, because we got to distribute bags from other churches. There was another church that got a day delay on their flight, and they weren't able to distribute, so we took some of their bags. And it was kind of neat for us to see those and what they had decorated. And the kids were like, oh, we don't care about the bags. This is about praying with people and about feeding people, and we can put that in any bag we want. But when I went to him and I said, hey, we've got these bags, do you want me to mail them to you? Do you want me to mail them back to your headquarters in Mississippi? What do you want me to do? And he looked at me kind of sideways and he goes, y'all don't have hungry people where you live? And he's like, okay, yeah. So in other words, take that ministry back with you, serve in that way back where you came from. Come down off the mountain. And when it's not this cool experience with all these folks on the same mission, and you're part of this big group, what are you gonna do, kind of a thing. So what are you gonna do with that? What does it look like down the mountain? So anyway, that's the call that Jesus is putting to his disciples. What is this? Yeah, I am the Messiah, but what does the Messiah look like? Yes, I am transfigured before you on the mountain. I am the Son of God, but what does that look like coming down the mountain, which we'll get way later, right before Lent, I'm sure this year, and probably not in Matthew, because we'll be ending his gospel in December. Yeah.
I just thought of something else.
Mhm.
So Peter has these confessions. He confesses, he denies Christ 3 times.
Mhm.
He tells Jesus 3 times that he loves him after the resurrection.
Yeah.
And here he's got 3 confessions too. He confesses that he's the Messiah.
Mhm.
He says, you can't go to the cross,
Yeah.
Messiah, and I'm going to build a house for you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I hadn't noticed that before
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. Well, and the building of the house of transfiguration also draws back to David, who said, hey, God, I'm going to build you a house.
Uh-huh.
God's like, I don't need a house.
Right.
And that's not your job anyway. That's not what I've called you to do. So you do what I'm telling you, not what you think you should do. Kind of thing, which kind of is the central message in all of this, is to look to Christ, look to Christ, look to Christ. And when you are opposing Christ, when you are the Satana, the opposite, the opposer of divine things, of what God is doing, then get behind and follow again. And get behind and follow again, and get behind and following again. So let's look at this again a little bit. So Peter's mansplaining, God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you. And then Jesus turns and says to Peter, get behind me, Satan. So Peter, or Jesus is not saying, Peter, you're the devil, or you're condemned, or you're damned, or that kind of thing. And I don't think anybody really gets to that conclusion anyway. But Satana does literally mean the adversary of God. Satan, Satan's name, first introduced in Job, is the adversary of God, the opposite, the accuser, the one who, as God blesses, stands and says, yeah, but. So I call it the yeah, but of God. Yeah, but you don't want these people, God. Yeah, but this creation was a mistake. Yeah, but et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but Jesus in the wilderness, why don't you make some bread? You're hungry. Yeah, but Jesus, why don't you rule the kingdoms of the earth? Yeah, but et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, so when Jesus says this to Peter, what he's saying to him is, you're an adversary of God. You're in the opposite ways of what God is doing. So get behind me, follow me, in a sense. It's almost like a new call to Peter. But then it's interesting. He says, you are a stumbling block to me. And I wonder about that. I don't know if that gets at the humanity of Jesus. Like, yeah, I'd love to go that way, Peter, but that's not how this is going to go. And you're part of the temptation, like Satan was in the wilderness, to draw me into ruling this kingdom, or saving the day right now, or being a hero for this time, or turning out the Romans and taking the throne of David. You're a stumbling block to me in that way. Yeah, go ahead.
King James says, thou art an offense unto me.
Yeah, right. And that may be more the spirit of that this is offensive, what you're saying is offensive to what God is doing. Or it may be that you're a tempter to me, you're acting like Satan in that way. So it's interesting to kind of just think about what Jesus is saying in this. Yeah. And then what I think is really interesting here is for you're setting your mind on not on divine things, but on human things. Now, when we think of human things, we think of things of this earth, right? And we can think of that in that kind of Gnostic, dualistic way. I think Pastor Bo was talking about, we used that word Gnostic before, where earth, flesh, humanity, these things bad, divine, holy, spiritual, heavenly, good, right? But that's not what Jesus is saying here. What are the divine things? The divine thing is that Jesus would take on the sin of the world and die for us. And then in 3 days be raised, which, by the way, they seem to ignore the resurrection thing all the way through. No disciples never seem to hear that last part, which maybe is just a reflection on humanity, how we hear the negative, not the positive. I'll be turned over, I'll suffer, I'll be killed, and on the third day be raised. But it seems like nobody can hear that last part. So anyway, but the divine things of God are actually focused on humanity, whereas the human things of Peter are focused on protecting the here and now, right? So the divine things are focused on humanity for all time and all space, so that they affect us, not just Peter and the disciples and the people of God at that time. But there's a reversal a little bit in there too, that the divine things are not, I'm going to go up to heaven and I'm going to leave you, and you should focus on that and try to be more heavenly and try to be more gooder and try to be all those kinds of things. But it focuses very much on what God is doing here in the earthly realm. So I kind of think that's an interesting twist that Jesus does there too. Before he gets to this, lose your life, find it, all that other kind of stuff, he kind of shows himself as being twisted up. The divine thing is to save humanity. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
You must have said that before, because I had that written in my Bible in another
I said it
color.
yesterday.
Device. Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Did you?
Well, I said it yesterday. I don't know if you wrote it yesterday.
Oh,
but-
maybe that was yesterday, yeah.
Yeah.
Divine things are focused on humanity.
Right.
Probably a handle.
Yeah. And to a certain extent here too, and I think this is, at least for me, it's kind of convicting. Peter's protection of Jesus, God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you, ultimately is a selfish statement, right? And I think of times, at least for me personally, where I've been more about, well, this is the righteous thing to do, or this is the principle, or this is the thing that must be done. And I neglect taking time to say that. I'm more focused on the principle than I am on the person. I don't know if any of you saw Marietta's post recently, but it was a kind of a confession from a megachurch pastor. And one of the things he said was I was more focused on this and not enough on this. And a lot of it had to do with relationships and people and their stories and their individual needs, and how he could speak to those and translate the gospel into those situations versus just touting these particular principles that you better kind of, be in line with this or else.
Mm.
There are so many times when I find myself, like maybe this is how to say it, more interested in being right. And I will couch that in ways of like I'm helping people.
Mhm.
It's kind of the root of and I come from this in the Midwest, but that passive aggressiveness kind of a thing. Like I remember saying in the car on our trip something to Zoe about, hey, if you're getting warm back there, let me know. And Karen looks at me and she's like, you're warm, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I am. And she's like, you can say I'm warm. You don't have to couch it in, you're trying to help Zoe. If you're warm, turn the air conditioning, down or whatever kind of thing. So she calls me on it because she's like, she has no time for the passive aggressive stuff. And I don't do it as much as my family does, but it comes out sometimes. And I think in some way, again, I don't think I was being the adversary of God in that situation, but it can come out in ways that we, in our anxiety and thinking we should be a certain way, may want to try to help somebody, or we're try to kind of do something, and get hyped up about it. And really what we're doing is we're protecting our own feelings of anxiety, or our own feelings of
That's
danger.
exactly what he's doing.
And that's exactly what Peter's doing
Yeah.
here. So, yeah, exactly. And certainly mansplaining it are those times too, where, oh, no, I've got the knowledge. I need to show everybody how cool I am, how great I am. So I'm gonna do that. I probably do it in Manna Bible study sometimes. Who knows? But anyway, I think that's kind of interesting how Jesus calls that out. Because what does Peter say? Oh, God forbid it, Lord. This should never happen to you. And what he's really saying is, God, I'm anxious about this. I'm afraid. I don't think this is right. And this isn't how I see the vision of what Messiah is. And so,
And it
so
shouldn't
Peter-
happen to me.
Yeah, right. He might as well say, this must never happen to me. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to follow you. I don't want to, all those kinds of things, which then again, Jesus says, get behind me, follow me. You're trying to lead. No, you don't lead me, you follow me. You're my disciple. So. And honestly, from this text, then from this time on, as we go through this year, we will be led towards, towards the cross. We'll be led towards Christ the King Sunday, which is coming 1 week early this year, by the way, so that we can do Lent. We can do the fullness of Lent, because I think the fourth Sunday of Lent is Christmas Eve or something like that. So
You mean that?
Advent. Sorry, did I say Lent? I said Lent. I get those mixed up. I don't get them mixed up. I get the words in my head backwards. So yes, we will be led towards Christ the King Sunday. We will be led towards the cross. We will be led towards seeing the glory of God before tasting death and him coming in his kingdom. So all of this kind of points us towards an intensifying as we rally next week, or homecoming or whatever. We're rallying around the cross. We're rallying around a ridiculous vision of what Savior and Messiah looks like. It's silly.
What does it mean for us today to take up our cross?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah, PJ.
I know. No, that's the question. Yeah, I mean, I think it can mean a lot of different things. What I think is important, and part of it is to get away from these sort of little false martyrdoms that we might have. Like if we have a hardship in our lives or something that we're struggling with, that's somehow, oh, that's just my cross to bear. As if somehow the hardships in our lives have been this thing from God to throw us across to say, yeah, carry that one for a bit, right? Or carry that for a bit. I think this speaks much more to the communal sense of taking up the cross, speaks much more to the church taking up the cross. So where are the places of and the faces of death and hopelessness and destruction in our world? And to accompany Christ and to follow him to the cross is to come alongside those places, to not turn away, to not be afraid and anxious in those situations, to not enter into that hopelessness, but to carry, again, not blowing sunshine, but to bring hope, to bring the promise of God's word to those places, to bring action and hands of service to those places. I think one of the examples I love about taking up the cross was this Young Life guy who was really, I mean, he was just like, I'm going to go serve, I'm going to go do to the hardest place kind of thing. And so he went to these, I don't know if it was Central America or if it was Mexico City or somewhere, but he was down, we'll say Mexico City, and he's in the outskirts of town and in the kind of by the garbage dump and in the slums of Mexico City. And he's trying to proclaim Christ to these young kids who are in the dump every day, scrounging for scraps of food or something they can sell or whatever it might be. And he's just falling on deaf ears. He's trying to proclaim Jesus to these kids, and they're just wandering around and they're doing their thing and they don't really have time for him. And he notices that every day they kind of sit down and they have this sort of lunch of scraps that they found, or bits and pieces of food, or that they're eating garbage basically. And finally one day he sits down with them. He scrounges around, he doesn't say anything to them, he just scrounges around and he finds his lunch amidst the garbage and he sits down and he eats with them. At risk to his own body and health. They're probably used to some of the bacteria and things that are in this stuff, but he sits down and instead of going to his lunch or getting his food somewhere else, he sits down with them and eats with them. And he says, that's when I could speak the gospel to them, was when I became, when I followed the Christ hymn, came down from the privilege that I had into their space and knew them in a way that even put my own body at risk. So it's kind of a big example, but I think I see it in the school district right now in their focus. It's not in practice as much, but in the focus, and it's certainly happening at my wife's school. And there are all kinds of fights about it, of being trauma informed, of meeting kids where they are, of being tenacious about keeping kids in the classroom, even amongst misbehavior that might have been kicked them out before, because they're kicked out of all kinds of places, and then they go to school and they're kicked out. Obviously, if they're assaulting someone or hurting someone, you have to intervene. But if they're throwing a tantrum, give them space. You seek what's hurting them and understand where they're coming from, what trauma they're carrying, what burdens they're carrying, and you seek to release those bonds. Again, I'm overwhelmed by how much it looks like the gospel, what they're trying to do in the schools today. Anyway, so I get on a high horse, or not a high horse, but a soapbox about that. But to come down to where people are, leaving our anxiety and losing ourself and our control and the things that we think need to be protected, and letting those die, and coming down into the space of those who we can't understand until we walk in their shoes. I think that's probably as close as I can think of to get to that sort of thing. Yeah.
The Sisters of Charity never had that problem in school.
Yeah. The Sisters of Charity.
Yeah.
They were charitable with the rulers, and they were charitable with yeah, right.
But none of the kids in that school had divorced parents either.
Yeah, right.
There weren't any single parents. I couldn't think of a single one.
But I bet there were unhealthy relationships. I bet there was abuse. I bet there were things like that. Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. No, exactly. And I think can be a longing for, a return to a particular something. But on one hand, as the prophet Billy Joel said, the good old days weren't always good, and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems. But if we are in worse times, as far as, the chaos and the brokenness and those kinds of things, that is where we are. What do we do with that? It isn't always just a return to innocence or a return to Eden kind of thing. So, yeah, it's not easy. I mean, my wife will say this again and again. She's like, I don't know what to do sometimes. I don't know how to, but I'm committed to this path of doing this way for the sake of the kids. And it's interesting because it takes power and control away from teachers to a certain extent. It becomes more kid focused without being kid controlled. And that's where it gets lost sometimes, is it's like, oh, well, if they're just going to let them run amok, it's just going to be chaos. But that's not what's intended either. So it's hard. It's a shift change. But the more I hear of it, the more I can see the way of Christ and the way of the cross in it. So anyway, that's another big example for me right now. I've seen that. Yeah, and I think service without the word in my name, without centering in Christ's word, just becomes, or can devolve into, again, self-focus, self-service. And I think studying God's word without acting that out in some particular way can become just pie in the sky piety. So I think Jesus is marrying those things together, that our service flows out of his word and following him. what that is. There's something against the door there?
The guy's putting the stuff on the window.
Oh, still doing that. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay, sorry, that was a lot of.
There's a close juxtaposition here to taking up your cross and following me.
Mhm.
Take up your cross and follow me. So following me is entering into pain. Following me is entering into, like you said, meeting people where they are and yeah, was it Luther that said that? I can't remember. I think it was Luther who says, you got to call it what it is. You got to call the bad thing what it is and just
Yeah.
enter into it,
Yeah, Luther talked about calling a thing what it is, that we we're truth tellers.
Truth tellers,
We
yeah.
call a thing what it is. Yeah. We look at something and say that's not right, or we look at something and say that's holy and blessed, and everybody else is running away or saying, oh, that's God's punishment, or that's God's whatever. So, and we can see Jesus spends a lot of time on that. Oh, things are going well, that must be God's blessing. Things are going poorly, that must be God's curse.
Mhm.
He really switches that up.
Switches it, yeah.
Yeah. So not that, yeah. I mean, I remember getting an incredible financial blessing for seminary through my work, that Boeing was going to pay for my books and classes and housing and all of that. And to a great deal anyway. And I remember Karen saying something about that being a blessing. I was like, oh no, God doesn't bless us through financial means. And she was like, oh really? So God can bless you this, but not through that, or kind of a thing. And she wasn't saying, oh, because we gave $100 in our offering, we've gotten a tenfold return. It wasn't that kind of televangelist kind of stuff that I think is drivel and garbage, but because I'm arrogant, conceited as much as Peter, but it was can you see God's blessings in a variety of things? So
you mansplained that to her.
I mansplained that to her too. Yeah. Probably a few examples. Is there such a thing as womansplaining, by the way? I had a friend who was not very popular on this day, but we were talking about, how God is not a man, or what, God is beyond the kind of the confines we put. We need those things to have to be able to kind of touch and feel who God is and understand. We need those personifications, but they're always, in a sense, a heresy. They're always a limiting of God's being transcendent of all those labels. And so we were taking away, like people would be reading scripture and they'd say God instead of he, or whatever it might be. And then somebody was reading a passage where it said, and the devil, and then it was a he, and he put up his hand, he goes, wait a second, is the devil how come we're okay with the devil being a man if we're not okay with God? So anyway, I've been womansplained too, right? So no, I'm just kidding. All right, so other things on this particular text.
Yeah, there's just a lot in here that
Yeah.
it's easy to read this and miss it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you make of denying yourself then? Let them deny themselves. Does yours say deny, or does King James say deny? Mhm. Yeah, I think that's pretty solidly that word.
Yeah, because those are the three things that are linked then. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me.
It's just gotta be human nature, isn't it? Or
What's that?
How did Pastor Bill put it? The Adam in us is.
Oh, the old Adam. Yeah. Fighting against the old Adam. So yeah, right. Mhm.
I wonder if that wouldn't be for me to go and sit down with a group of people would be very uncomfortable for me, because it seems like I'm just trying to be someone I'm not. And so, but to do that, I would have to deny who I am and get down on to try to understand. And that's almost impossible for me to understand what some of those people have, some of the homeless, some of the people who really have a lot of problems because of my life I've had, thankfully. And so to deny myself, to try to explain or try to ignore and feel comfortable would be extremely hard for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was something, I don't remember what it was, but the when you joined in with Mother Teresa's kind of, what was that group? The Sisters of, I don't know what they were called. Anyway, when you joined in with the work they were doing with all of these people who were very sick and hurting, there was something that you had to do to begin your time with her. And it was like, I can't remember, it was drinking the spit of people who were sick, or it was, yeah, I can't imagine. I just can't even fathom that, but it was something like that, like exposing yourself in a way to what the folks you would be working with. And it was like this way of saying, I'm fully committed. I'm not above these folks I'm serving. So sorry to gross you up. Yeah. Believe me, that would be my punishment in hell.
I think it'd be very scary too, because so many of them have mental issues that need to be addressed that we have failed to do in our society.
Yeah.
And for me to be there, it would be very scary for me.
Yeah. Right.
Because of my life I've been privileged to lead, to have.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, I think about that. I think that's why that story of the guy sitting in the dump and kind of collecting his lunch the same way those guys were collecting theirs was telling or convicting in a sense. But and I don't think it necessarily has to be that extreme. It usually isn't. I think that's probably part of the question, Carrie, is we don't have a cross hanging over our heads, to confess Christ. We don't have this death hanging over us, kind of a thing, in that way. But yeah, there's definitely. I've had people say before, we go on trips to different places or far off, whatever, and I've had folks say, I can take you 4 miles from this place and put you in a situation where you have all kinds of ways to serve. So I know that's true. We know that's true all around us, but we can kind of insulate from that. So.
But I do think we have to get into an uncomfortable position, whatever that uncomfortable position. It won't take much for me to get to an uncomfortable position. But I'm just saying, I think we have to do something that isn't. We have to become uncomfortable. That's the only way to put it, in order to understand or to one of the ways to serve. Put that way.
Yeah. Well, I think this denying of self for me too has been, I think a lot of times I've heard that as a kid and thought it's has something to do with a kind of self-hatred. And I don't think that's, if Jesus was saying that, I think he'd say deny themselves for those who, for those who lose their life for my sake will, I don't know what he'd say on the end of that, if it was about self-hatred. So it's not self-hatred, but it's there is a death and resurrection that happens in the self, and in order for resurrection to happen, there's death. And so putting away of our anxieties, our insecurities, our worries, our all that kind of stuff. So again, going back to the trip this year, I remember one particular kid who texted me probably 17 times, like the day of packing and the night before. We had to check our bags. We did that before we left for the trip, as we usually do for international, to make sure everything is locked and loaded and ready to go. But gosh, she was anxious about what to bring, and was this okay, and was that okay, and was the other thing okay? And it was just an embodiment of the anxieties that she had about what we were going to be doing and being far away. And that's normal. I'm certainly not shaming her for that in any way. But at one point I said to her, you have these incredible gifts of organization and management and kind of being the mom of the group. And I said, that's going to come out in anxiety when things feel a little bit out of control. And so just know that's part of your gift. You know, there are going to be downsides to it in certain situations as well. I'm not like this person. So I'm like, woohoo, we get to fly by the seat of our pants. We don't know exactly what's going to happen.
So
Hooray.
take that up and follow me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, where I need to hear that in a particular way, she needed to hear that in not an opposite way, but in a different way. And so, and then she seemed to kind of like be texting a little bit less and not as worried about it. And she did great and came back from that feeling really transformed. Talked to her parents and they're like, oh my gosh, this trip was, you know, her dad, who's usually a very quiet person, was just gushing at our kind of reunion thing, potluck that we had. He was just gushing about the transformation that she'd had through this experience. And again, it's like she found her life. You know, we can see it right there.
I think too, I keep going back to Luther, but he says, you know, where you put your
He's not
treasure.
Jesus. Kim.
I know he's not Jesus, but you know, where you put your treasure becomes your God.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so he's right now, Peter is sort of his God, his own God. And so Jesus is saying, I'm your God, deny yourself and follow the true God, me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Deny your gods, follow God. Yeah. Last week's sermon title was a week early, I guess. Yeah. And all of this really
Because that's
does.
what he's trying to do, right? Peter's trying to control the situation.
Yeah, he is.
And
Yeah.
Jesus is smart. He knows exactly. He's got Peter's number. You know?
He really does. Peter keeps coming, keeps swinging.
Keeps trying.
He keeps coming out swinging.
Yeah, he's gonna
He
try to build him a house, but
gets punched in the face every time. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I just think it's important to understand that denial of self has more to do with, I think that's well said, has more to do with this denying of the gods we worship and hold on to and protect. Even protecting Jesus himself in a roundabout way. And to put that away, to deny that. Yeah. Right. Well, let's see what our other passages for this day. Yeah, then you work on that.
Romans
go.
12,
What's that?
is it
Romans 12, yeah. We continue to walk through Romans. I don't know, did PB talk about Romans much last week?
We spent about 10 minutes on it.
No, about the same here, I guess. Yeah, let's take a look there. I think you might have had a third reading as well for last week. Yeah, this might be an answer to your earlier question, Carrie, your question of the day. Someone want to read that?
Sure.
Okay.
Let love be without dissimulation, abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love and honor, preferring one another. Not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer. Continuing instant in prayer, probably.
Yeah.
Distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay it, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him to drink. For in doing so, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Do not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good.
Yeah. Most folks get stuck on that. Or by doing so, you will heap burning coals on their heads, right? But that was actually a way to, I read this a while back, so I got to go back to this and look at it again, but it was something to do with actually warming someone who was cold. It wasn't burning them to death. So my old Adam or my inner Peter wants to, likes that. Oh, all right. I'm setting them up for the hellfire of damnation by feeding them, being kind to them.
Killable kindness.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I took that to mean it would just make them madder.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to look it up again. It might be. Yeah. Yeah. We often have this conversation, had it with our kids even, but with younger kids, they're chasing me, Pastor PJ, make them stop chasing me. I said, stop running. It won't be fun anymore. I mean, unless they're really trying to hurt you, then keep running, but run faster. But if they're just messing with you and you don't like it, stop running. It's not fun to chase somebody who isn't running. So, right. I mean, they might find another way, they might tickle you or whatever, but yeah. Have you ever fed an enemy or given them something to drink, or have you ever participated in that? Because I'm pretty bad at this one. So I don't have any examples. I mean, I've gotten to know people I didn't think I was going to like, but I don't know about an enemy. They weren't necessarily an enemy. They were just someone I judged too quickly and found I found Christ in them as I got to know them. But we have no examples.
I haven't really done that for an enemy, but
Yeah.
I've done it for Mormon missionaries who've come to my house.
Mhm.
So I almost hesitated to say something. It's not like they're enemies,
Right,
but
right.
I wanted to show them hospitality and be respectful, and listen to what they say. And then I said a thing or two, but
Yeah.
and partly because I'm from Utah, and my friends
Yeah.
had sons and daughters who were getting doors slammed in their faces, and I
Yeah.
just didn't want to do that.
Right. Exactly.
So I don't know, that's probably not a very good example, but
I don't know.
It's the best one we've got.
Yeah.
When it's all you got.
You win.
That's all you got.
You win.
yeah.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah. It's funny too. Sometimes I find myself wanting to just get rid of them, not necessarily missionaries, but whatever it might be, if it's sales or something like that, to get rid of them quickly because I don't trust myself not to get sold. Not on the LDS church. I'm not worried about that, but on some cleaner or something or something like that.
Mhm.
So I can't slam the door, but at the same time, I try to. I've lied. I've said, "Oh, we're on our way out. Sorry, we'll have to come back." Kind of a thing. Zoe, come here. We're leaving right now. Where are we going? I don't know. Anywhere. Kind of thing. But yeah. It's there's something about just treating people as humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well, and
try
I
hard to
suppose-
remember. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Margaret.
I try hard to remember that I haven't walked in their shoes and they haven't walked in my shoes. And it's very hard for me to constantly be remembering that you don't understand where I come from. I am very abrupt. I have certain problems that just because I'm the bull going through the china cabinet is the nickname I had when I was a kid. I say things too fast sometimes. So please don't judge me because that's not what I'm really trying to say. And I try to remember not to judge them, even though it's sometimes very hard.
Right. Yeah. Yes, spending time with family this past week on that vacation was the focus of it anyway. And I have one sister who blasts and I have one sister who stuffs. And especially with each other, the one will blast and the other one will stuff. And they are the worst combination in that way, particularly. They love each other, of course. They live in the same town and all that kind of stuff, but shopping with them for the party for my parents was an experience. There was so much unspoken language going around that it was, well, no, well, why don't we not do that? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you can if you want to. Blast stuff, blast stuff, blast stuff. Yeah, it was interesting to watch. So, but with the one sister, once she blasts, she's done. And the other sister is, once she stuffs, you never know when it's coming out, kind of a thing. So, and I have my own foibles in that too. I'm not standing above them. But it's interesting to watch that interaction. Yeah. And just to appreciate one another and to love each other and to try to figure out one another in that way and appreciate. Yeah. I've told the story several times of two students that I immediately didn't like in seminary. One because she was so pie in the, she was so pie in the sky, and the other one because she had everything color coded and tabbed, and I'm like, no, we're not going to get along. And that one who was color coded and tabbed, we ended up being co-presidents of our student body our senior year, and she died of cancer not too long after, way too soon in her 40s, unfortunately, but was a great friend. And the other one I found had experienced horrible abuse at the hands of her powerful small town father, who kind of owned the town and did horrible abusive things to her and to others. And so she had this mystical connection with God, because that was how she could connect with God, apart from the very earthly things, horrible things she was experiencing. So got a great appreciation for what she brought to the church as a pastor and a leader. So anyway, yeah, those are ways to, I think knowing people is an experience of taking up the cross as well. Yeah, but they're not easy. Yeah. And so I don't think that's self-hatred. I think we have to know ourselves too. I think we have to have some security in ourselves as well. In fact, Karen was saying yesterday that the principal was talking a lot about how's your mental health as a teacher. If you're going to manage all of these behaviors and things and not just be able to say, you're out. How's your mental health to how are you bringing down the anxiety level? How are you setting the stage in your classroom? It's hard work. You got to work on yourself. So it's actually knowing yourself. You will find yourself in the losing of some of those things, the facing of some of those things that we stuff away or pretend aren't there, or the masks we put on, putting those down. That's very, very risky, as you said, Margot, getting in a group of people and having to be vulnerable. That's hard stuff. Yeah.
My first semester of seminary, I had this class called Christian Public Leader. You know this story.
Yeah.
And it was touchy-feely to the max, and I just cannot stand touchy-feely stuff.
Yeah.
It just kumbaya, it just drives me crazy. And so there was a lot of that, and there's a lot of, I hear you, I am walking with you in that, and I'm like, oh, it just drives me.
Leave me alone. Get away.
And we had to say that, we had to say, Ross, I hear you, I see you, and and so I just got more and more arrogant about how much of a waste of time this class was, and how stupid it was, and how these people just seemed so disingenuous. And then PJ asked me to help with confirmation, and I went into that pretty arrogant too, that I was going to teach these kids a thing or two. And something happened where I got educated by one of the kids. Riley, do you remember that one?
Oh no, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember you being there, and I kind of remember the situation, but I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, I say what it was. We were having lunch, and here I am with these kids who are my daughter's age, just a little bit older. And so I think, well, I'll just enter. I know a lot about rap music because Ruthie listens to rap music a lot, I listen to it with her because I want to hear what she's listening to. Mm-hmm. And so
I remember your story with Pastor Bill on that one.
There's this song.
But anyway, you go ahead.
Oh yeah, that was a bad one too. There was this song that just is peppered with terrible words, and it's like gunshots through this song. It has no rhyme or reason, and so we call it the Tourette song, because it's like they just come out with it, And so I thought it's hilarious. And so I said, you know, I told that story. And one of the kids says, well, my best friend has Tourette's. And I just I died.
Yeah.
I just died. He piled heaping coals on my head.
Yeah.
And that was the thing then that let me enter into this class and actually learn something from it. It killed my arrogance.
Yeah.
And I actually got a lot out of the class
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think a rap, a couple of weeks ago, that's like that, Isaiah chapter 55. He was the first rapper.
Yeah. There's some psalms, there's some, come, everyone who thirsts, come to me and I will give you wine and bread. Oh,
Oh.
oh, yeah. Oh, that's funny.
That's
Yes.
hilarious.
Well, on that note, but yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what does it mean to take up your cross and follow Jesus?
Mhm. To
Let
deny
love be
yourself.
genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord, rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers, which I love because it's like contribute to the needs of the saints. That's who is my neighbor, but also hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with the rejoicing, weep with the weeping. That's a big vulnerability. Yeah. In fact, I know for me, like weeping is not what you do as a guy, right? From the Midwest kind of thing. I shouldn't hanker around the Midwest, but it's not a thing you do as a guy. And so.
Well, we want to make people
But
feel better too. We don't
Right.
want to just.
No. We don't want to just be like, be wailing along or be false in that, like they would hire, mourners and things like that. But sometimes you have to stand with your, with a non-anxious presence outside of that. But there is something to say with being vulnerable enough to feel with someone and to share in their suffering.
Because that's that until like just recent years and learning with you guys in the school and stuff. My first inclination is to make somebody try to feel better, to say, oh, don't worry about that, it's okay, instead of just entering into where they are with that. That's really powerful.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's season 3, show 8 on The Chosen, where they start out with a lament psalm, and David and I don't know if it's Bathsheba or who it is, but David and his wife are enjoying the lament psalm, even though they're in a great mood. And then the lament psalm is used later in the modern Jesus time, kind of struggle of a miscarriage. So anyway. Yes, great. Oh, good stuff. Okay, well, let's pray and we'll get on to lunch and other things of the day. Good and loving God, we give you thanks for this time together. Again, pray for safe travels to South Dakota and a meaningful goodbye and remembrance. And we ask that you would be with us all with your word. You would help us to put to death those things that keep us from the love that you would intend for us to have among each other and for those outside of this place. And so help us to carry that cross, to follow you, and to continue to walk in the ways of discipleship as we rally around your word in these next weeks. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thanks for coming by.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Mark.
Thanks, Margot.
Thanks, you guys. Drive safe.